All right, so this video is gonna be a little bit different. And forgive me for the janky setup. I'm out in Cancun right now. So I don't have my tripod. So I literally have this like janky setup right now with like two pillows. But kind of just wanted to document this moment, and I might upload it on YouTube. I'm not even sure yet, but essentially, I woke up, went to go get some coffee before I leave on my flight in the next hour. It just made me feel grateful for the opportunities that creating content has brought to my life, and how much it's impacted my life, and coming from what I come from, and to have these kind of experiences, it kind of feels surreal sometimes, and I think oftentimes when we're on the grind and we're on the go, it's always like, oh, what's next? But in situations like this and in moments like these that are so unique and are such a small percentage of the time, it's important to just kind of reflect, feel some sense of gratitude and gratefulness. God has been amazing in my life, and it's surreal, to be honest, to be able to have moments like this. Like literally yesterday, I flew out to Atlanta with my client. We got a private jet, flew to Cancun, and right now we're here in Cancun. Just because I decided to go all in into content creation, and so many little things, and it's the quote unquote the insignificant things, being able to fill my gas tank whenever I pull up to the gas station. It's being able to give my kids whatever groceries they want. So little things like that, things that I didn't get as an opportunity, growing up as a kid, and just being able to kind of do that all because of a camera. Like, it feels surreal, and God is good. I just wanted to document this one and kind of reflect and put things into perspective. We all have goals, we have aspirations, we're always wanting more, and it's these moments right here where you kind of just stop and realize, like, damn, like, I've come a long way. There's always going to be more wants, there's always going to be things that we continue to desire, there's going to be more goals to accomplish. Like, all that's forever going to be there. I think, if you watch this channel, I'm pretty sure you're someone that's driven, dedicated. You aspire for more, and once you accomplish something, you're always like, what's next? It's that hunger in us, that's relenting and never stops. It's always going. But I think it's also important to just kind of take a moment. I'm not saying a day, I'm not saying a week, but take a moment to reflect and realize, like, man, like, we've really built something. We really did something. We really changed our lives. We really turned things for the better. Mom's gonna be good. The ones that you love the most are gonna be good, and I think that's the most important part in this whole journey. I think once you have all the necessities, it's no longer about you anymore. Now it's about the ones that you love and helping them be able to experience those things as well, right? Hold on, let me clean up the thing because it's super humid out here. Hold on. It's so humid out here in Cancun. Once you have your necessities met, and you realize that, like, all the things that you desired weren't really like the final destination. I think it was just things that maybe you didn't have as a child. Maybe certain things made you feel a certain way. Maybe you feel like, I don't know, it's like all these like little, for better lack of word, traumas, right? When you grow up and you desire so much, and obviously our parents weren't in a financial situation. For my case, I grew up with a single mom, so that made it even harder too as well. To not have the little things that we desire as kids, and it's not so much, it's just desires. As a kid, you want things, you don't know why you want them, you just want to experiment, and you want to just try, and not being able to have these opportunities as a kid. Now that I'm older, I've traveled to places I couldn't even imagine traveling to. I bought designer, I have a nice car, I've had multiple cars that I've always dreamed of having. And I think once you get them, you start to realize that it was never about the cars, but it was overcoming and finally being able to let go of those moments in your childhood where you feel like you finally became the person that you needed to be, or that you wanted when you were a kid. And I think that's one of the most fulfilling things. And Yeah, it's such an interesting dynamic, you know. Again, like I said, it was never about the things, it was just about you being capable of obtaining them and not having that lack of, you know, even the designer, like, designer doesn't make me, you know, but I wanted to test it, I wanted to try it. And, you know, I've been able to do that multiple times, you know, same thing with the cards, same thing with the experiences. And now it's like, damn, I really became a person capable of doing these things, you know. And it's, life is really, really simple at the end of the day if you really think about it. There is so my birthday is actually tomorrow, so I'm flying back out today so I can spend tomorrow with my family. But, you know, my aunt from Mexico, and like how I said, I grew up in Mexico up till I was about 5 years old. And, you know, I've always, my has been, you know, like second moms to me. You know, they've always showed me love. They've always, you know, yeah, you know, just showed me love, you know, super affection and everything. And one of my aunts from Mexico, she sent me over a mug, and damn, it still hits. She sent me over a mug that basically said, you know, te quiero mucho, Toñito. And that basically, like, that's a nickname that they call me, you know what I mean? Um, and it just reminded me that there's, like, this journey that we're on, it's much bigger than us. You know, there's so many people before us that, you know, have tried to break free and just couldn't, you know, have sacrificed it all to be able to give you and I an opportunity to be able to break free, to be able to break past what we've known for generations, you know. And it's a it's a it's a legacy thing, you know. Like, I'll never take this for granted. I'll never feel like, hey, this was all me, because I know it hasn't been just me. You know, this is God first, and then, you know, my mom, you know, my dad, and, you know, in his own way too as well. You know, my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, like, every single one of them has contributed in some shape or form to you and to me to be able to be the person that finally breaks through. This is not just about you and me. Like, yes, it was our turn. It was our turn to step it up and kind of carry that torch and carry that cross. But, you know, we've had help along the way. We've had people try before us in order for us to be able to be the person that finally breaks free. And I don't ever want you to not have that in your heart, you know, because I think it's easy, you know, when your dad isn't around, to have some sort of anger towards him. When your mom wasn't there because she had to work, to have some sort of resentment towards that. You know, I'm not saying this is the case with me, but I'm just saying because for a very long time that's how I was. You know, I was very resentful. You know, my dad not being there, I was very resentful. Like, why was my mom the way that she was with me, etc. But at the end of the day, everything needed to happen the way that it did, and everything gave me the courage. If it wasn't for all those things, I would have probably wouldn't have broken free. You know, if I would have had a picture perfect, you know, family, or, you know, just both of my parents, maybe I probably wouldn't have even pursued something like this. I would have never had enough pain in me to move and to become relentless in the pursuit of wanting to break free and wanting to change my life and those around me. And it's the same thing for you, right? You've had to experience some level of pain and some level of trauma to trigger that inside of you, to trigger that instinct to want more and to be the person that finally breaks free and breaks the chains and generational curses. We were put on the world for that, you know. And I think it's time for us to own it, understand that everything needed to happen the way that it did, or else we probably wouldn't have moved. You know what I mean? You know, God is always gonna teach us a lesson until we finally understand it. You know, God is gonna put us in the battleground. You know, we are His strongest soldiers. We need to be tested, right? We need to go through the training. We need to go through the battles. We need to get the scars. We need to get the cuts in order for us to be that warrior. You know, a warrior isn't a warrior just because we say it. You know, we have to be tried and tested, you know, in battle. And I think that's life, you know. And I think a lot of us steer away from it because we think, oh, only bad things happen to me, or only I didn't have a dad, or only this, or only that. But that's the battleground. That's the skills and the things that you needed to develop so that you break that cycle, right? So that you could become a better dad for your kids, so that you could become a better example for your nieces and nephews, so that you could become a better example for your family. Because if not, you know, it's very difficult to understand what it means to be awake, you know. And there's a really, really powerful quote that says, you know, some men wake up at 18. Some men wake up at 30, and some men never wake up. And this applies across the board, to women as well. But it's a really, really factual statement. Being awake is something that you can't simply explain, but it's like I have a higher consciousness. We have a higher level of awareness. You have a higher level of awareness, which is why you're here, and you understand that something you have a calling. You have that understanding that you have a calling and you need to fulfill it, and it's not easy, but you feel it in your gut, and it will never ever go away until you satisfy that feeling, until you satisfy that purpose. um, and essentially this is why I wanted to have this conversation, because it's very hard to get into this framework of mind, to be vulnerable, to for it to be the right moment, to where you genuinely feel it from the heart and want to speak it. This isn't picture perfect. Like, I'm literally here in the balcony just chilling, shooting this video. I'm gonna post a picture of how it looks, how I have the setup. My client's literally passing right there. I'm very grateful for that man. He's leveled me up so much. He's not easy to work with, you know what I mean? But at the same time, like, I'm forever grateful. Him, I got to experience what it was for it to be possible to make 10K a month from one client. He's the one that gave me that opportunity. And the pressure to deliver, he definitely made me feel it. But I stepped up to the plate. Funny enough, when I first started working with him, it was super hectic. He wanted things quick. He wanted things done super fast. And same day, I could have had a 12-hour day, but hey, we need this clips to go up because we need to drop, because everybody's going to drop and we need to be the first to do it. And it was stressful at first because I had never done that. I was always used to, like, maybe the next day or in 48 hours, but he helped me raise the bar. And there was a point where I was, what, dealing with him isn't even worth it. I don't care if it's $10,000. Like, I do not care. And immediately, right when I had that thought in my mind, was like, but wait, what if God put him in my life for a reason? What if there's something that I need to learn here? What if, this is going to take me to the next level? What do I need to learn here? What do I need to learn from him? And I stuck it out. I sucked it up. And that eventually ended up changing my life completely. I've been able to take, my family to Europe. You guys already know the story, but it was because of that man. You know what I mean? And I'm forever grateful with him. So shout out to you, Marcus, if you ever get a chance to watch this. But yeah, there's gonna come people into your life that are gonna put that pressure. They're gonna, put their foot on your neck, so that you can either sink or swim. And it's up to you what happens then. And just show up every single day. Nothing. People can guide you. You can get the best opportunities in the world. You can get everything, at your feet. But if you don't pick it up, nothing will ever come from it. And same thing with opportunities. Same thing with education. Same thing with knowledge. Like, a lot of people get stuck on, just being information junkies and, having knowledge in their brain. But knowledge is one thing. You need to apply that knowledge so that it becomes wisdom, so that it becomes a skill set, so that it becomes something that just comes natural to you. And that's the part where a lot of people lack, because it gets uncomfortable. I did a post on yesterday, actually, where essentially people will push through a show at the beginning when it's boring, because other people say, hey, it gets better. It gets better on episode number 4. It gets better on episode number 5. Or, you know what I mean? But a lot of us won't push through our life because it gets a little bit challenging at first, because it's a learning curve when you first start. You know what I mean? And it's so interesting to me, because we don't do that, but we're willing to do that for a show that will never ever impact us in a way to truly be someone in life, and to give the life that we always desire to our family, to our kids, to our parents, to our loved ones. And again, whatever you learn, apply, even if it's badly applied, but apply it, because in that application you'll learn to trust yourself. You'll learn how it feels to do it. You'll learn how to analyze it, You learn how to critique it, not in a negative way, but in a way in which you can improve it and how you can do it better the next time. And this applies to both to content, both to business, both to client acquisition, to reaching out to a girl. Like, all these things are the same thing, but you have to fail forward. A lot of us are scared of failing, but we forget to realize that you can fail forward. Failing isn't just going backwards. Failing, you can go forward, because that's how you gain the experience and the confidence to be like, oh, I did this and that didn't work out. Okay, now let me try this way, right? But yeah, I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but at the end of the day, I'm just speaking from the heart. And like I said, this is something that I feel was very much needed to be documented and said. Hard to be in the frequency of gratitude, because we're always go, go, go. If you're a dad, if you're a mom, you're always thinking about the kids. If you have a business, you're always thinking about the business. Um, there's always, our parents, etc. We always have all these, worries or things that we're always thinking about. And it's very rare to have these moments of peace, to be able to experience gratitude, to be able to experience feeling fulfilled, and just being in a sense of gratitude. It's people get to see, the, oh, I make this much amount of money a month. Oh, look at the life that I live. Oh, look at the experiences that I've been able to have. Look how good my business is doing. That's such a small percentage. Like, look at this trip that I did with my family. All that is the 1% of what it is to be an entrepreneur, what it is to be a business owner. And people have it the other way around. The 99% of the time, it's the grind, it's the hustle, it's the stress, it's the pressure, it's the sleepless nights, it's the overthinking, it's all these, the pressure, you know what I mean? And the 1% is those glimpses that people get to see of the challenges and the training that we had to endure to be able to experience that 1% of the time. Um, so it's, if you're going through it, if you're in the developing stages of becoming the person that you want to become, I hope this video was able to, you know, impact you in a way where you feel like, hey, you know what, I'm meant for more. I have my cross to carry, and I'm gonna choose to carry that cross proudly. I choose to carry that cross, with a passion and with a purpose and with a drive, because I know how many people before me, I know how much they've sacrificed. Some people have given their lives, for you to have this opportunity. Some people went through their entire life never experiencing what it was to feel like there was an opportunity at the other side of hard work, you know what I mean? Or at the other side of, a later part of their life, so always be grateful to even have the awareness of knowing what's possible, or even having the awareness to be able to go and fight for more, to even have the opportunity to fight for more. For me, my family comes from Mexico, and a lot of times those opportunities aren't there. It's very minimal people that actually break through. And, because of that, I'm forever grateful that, my parents made one of the biggest sacrifices of their life to leave everything they knew and loved in Mexico to be able to give me and my brother a better opportunity. And even on top of that, my brother passed away at an early age, and even that gave me a bigger sense of purpose. And you gotta realize that so many people have sacrificed so much just for you to be here. Even if in your eyes what they did was insignificant, it was the biggest thing. And they probably sacrificed even more than both you and I, to be honest. They've sacrificed it all, everything, to the point to risking their life, to cross the Rio Grande, to cross the border through the desert, to cross the border in a trunk, in so many different ways, just to be able to give you and I an opportunity. And never ever take that for granted, because they literally put it all on the line. When was the last time that you put it all on the line? So never forget that. And again, it's just, we have a duty, we have a calling, we need to fulfill it. And yeah, I hope this video impacts you and it reminds you of why you're at where you are. Hopefully, it reminds you of, you know, that you are capable. Hopefully, it reminds you that you are worthy and that you were chosen to carry the baton on to the next player. That next player might be your kids. That next player might be your grandchildren. The next player might be, you name it. But it's your duty to give it your best in your own race so that the next person that comes after you is set up in the best possible. And again, remember, people have sacrificed so much for both you and I to even be in a position to enjoy the life that, you know, so many people wish they could have. You know, like again, like I said, I'm here in Cancun in a balcony looking at this beautiful resort, all inclusive, literally flew in on a private jet, doing what I love. Have, you know, one of them. I have an amazing family. You know, God is good, but it's always time to pay it forward. It's always an opportunity to pay it forward. I mean, no matter how insignificant it might feel to you, it matters the most to those that are around you, to those that love you, to those that care for you. Do it for them. You know, if you can't develop the courage or the drive to do it for yourself, do it for other people. I know how much that helps me. You know, I know when I can't do it for myself, I wake up in the morning, I see my kids sleeping, see my wife sleeping, I see them in bed, and I'm like, that's exactly who I do it for. That's exactly why I'll wake up 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 2, 3 hours of sleep, 17, 18-hour days, just to be able to give them the life that they deserve, to be able to give them the life that, you know, they deserve. And, but yeah, you know, I think I'm just rambling on, but again, I just wanted this video to be something from the heart. You know, I gotta start reading because I gotta catch that flight. You know, it's about an hour drive from here to the airport. You know, I love my family. I love God above all. I love the opportunity that I was given. I love the cross that I gotta carry, and you know, I'm excited for what the future holds. And you know what? Let's keep getting it. Love y'all. Have a blessed day.